Thanks everybody for coming to the Martin Kersten Memorial at the start of the CIDR conference. Please come in. So my name is Peter Bons, and I was a PhD student of Martin at some time, and still work at the institute where he worked for a very long time, the CWI, the Dutch Center for Mathematics and Computer Science Research, in the group he created, the Database Architectures Group, also in the position that he held also for a long time at the CIDR, because he was a member of the management team overseeing multiple groups, and that's also where I am. But this is about Martin, who regrettably is no longer with us. This is a picture of Martin that I think I took in 2005 in CIDR. So people will recognize, people who have been to a Silmar recognize a Silmar here. Yeah, so CIDR stands for the Conference on Innovative Data Systems Research. So innovative data systems research is really what motivated Martin. So CIDR was really also his conference, a conference that he found to be very important. And I think he was at every CIDR. And at most CIDRs, he also had a paper and a talk. So yeah, that's also why we really had to do this event right at CIDR, with so many people who also knew Martin and also shared his passion for innovative data research. Okay, so this is a picture at CWI, taken at CWI, but not by me, because I wasn't around at CWI in that time. So Martin Kersten founded the database research group at CIDR in the late 80s. And he was very young when he did that. Arno.
I'll talk about this later.
Okay. Oh, sorry, that's not the late 80s. It's 85, yes. I'm sorry, I wasn't around. I think this picture is, well, officially in the CIDR image database, it says 1991, but I doubt it, kind of. I think it's earlier, but okay, not sure about it. Maybe data that may not be correct. But yeah, I would even say that, okay, he created a group, but he also created, yeah, it was the first research group in data systems research in the Netherlands. So he started the systems research and database research, systems research in the Netherlands, in my view. Of course, there was Jan de Beek and there were other people, but like as a group dedicated to the topic, I think this is accurate, and has been very important and recognized, Martin, with his database systems research in the Netherlands as such. And well, the database architecture group is still around, so his work is being continued. Yeah, so at the time, so the 85, the late 80s, the start of the 90s, some people already thought that database research or database systems research had culminated in a way. Because at that moment, there was already a pretty high adoption of the idea of database systems outside academia. There was a database ready in the late 80s. I think Oracle just won the database wars against Ingress. And there were, of course, was also IBM in the scene, and it was already a $1 billion industry. So it was pretty mature. And we had a postdoc, or Martin had a postdoc in his group, Cesar Galindo Legaria, who came to the CIDR 1 year. And later, he went on to go to Microsoft, because Microsoft back then bought Sybase to create SQL Server. So kind of the big players were there, and Cesar was a very important person in in making SQL Server as well. So we were in that age where it looked like, okay, database systems had been invented and was a solved problem. But in Martin's view, these were dinosaurs. So the dinosaurs, because, well, database systems research is, and Martin was very aware of that, it is a large-scale software effort. These are some of the most, or maybe the most complex pieces of software around, with very many lines of codes. It takes many people years to create such code and to bring it up to maturity. And the dinosaurs basically all followed the same recipe, the same architecture for a database system. And Martin, of course, was convinced that this was not the right way. And Martin, one of the characteristics for me of Martin is counter-current thinking. So he really wanted to explicitly explore the things that other people would be not looking at because they were boxed in to their box. And Martin was always thinking out of the box. He was at his best trying to remove the very most steadfast assumptions that people were saying, well, this is always the case. He was saying, what if this is not the case? What would the system architecture look like if we remove that assumption? I think in the paper that he presented at CIDR on database cracking, he was talking about, you people, you think you know the moon because you always look at the moon, but you only see one side of the moon. You have never looked at the other side of the moon, the dark side of the moon. And that was a kind of an analogy. And behind MonadiB, MonadiB came out of something around trolls and goblins, and that's why the lower layer of MonadiB is called a Goblin Database Kernel, GDK. In the early days of object-oriented programming. But MonadiB obviously is Martin's life work. So Martin kind of, you could even say, was MonadiB, Mr. MonadiB, and this system has been very, very important for Martin. And this slide actually is his slide. It was the slide he presented when he got the Royal Decoration. So that was just after, well, at his retirement. And he gave a presentation of his, well, the loose ends of his research career, but this was this overview slide of MonadiB. So MonadiB was definitely a product of counter-current thinking, where everything was different. You know, instead of using records, he was using columns. Instead of optimizing for disk, he was designing for main memory. Instead of doing an executor in an iterator fashion, tuple at a time, he had a column algorithm where all the operations were column at a time. So this system was a very, very different design point in the database architecture design space. And this is actually quite valuable. The problem is, and that's still a problem in our community, that we know very few design points. And why do we know so few design points? Because it's very expensive to create a new database system and really test out the properties of such a database system. It takes years of multiple people working together to create this system and to get it off the ground. So that's why all the dinosaurs kind of use the same design, because this was the, well, proven design that originally was in Ingress and in System R, and other people worked from there. And well, with MonadiB, Martin Kersten gave our community a completely different way of thinking about how you could create a database system. Yeah, and we should be very thankful for that, because even though maybe currently the state of the art is not exactly the same as MonadiB, the MonadiB experiment and the MonadiB design taught us very, very important lessons. And inspired new work. There is also something about systems research that Martin felt very important. So So people kind of think maybe of systems work as applied research, maybe, you know, because you're trying to create a system that might be useful for something. But I think Martin looked at systems research as something really fundamental, because after all, the systems that we use, the software systems that we use to program computers, completely shape our thinking of what programming a computer really is. This holds for operating systems, holds for programming languages, but it also holds for database systems, which are the lowest layer of almost any application architecture. So this is a fundamental piece of software that is almost everywhere in IT stacks. So what is fundamental research? Is it theoretical computer science for computer science? I disagree. Martin certainly disagrees with that. He thought that this work was also fundamental computer science research, because we are working on the foundations of IT architectures. Another thing that made Martin stand out and very different from other group leaders of colleagues in the field is that Martin valued code over papers. So in many groups, it is about paper output. Okay, your Sigma paper, get your CIDR paper, get your FieldDB paper. In Martin's eyes, papers were secondary, and the system was the first thing and the most important thing. And that is also a mentality that is in me. That's also, I think, in DuckDB. And it's really important. It's a really important distinction, and you have to think about it. So if you really want to contribute to something to the CIDR field, you have to get for certain areas like database systems, you have to get your hands dirty. You have to try all these design decisions, this combination of design decisions that make a system in a real system to find out whether this is really a good idea. There is no way of theoretically, currently at least, there's no way of theoretically proving an optimal database architecture. So it is about creating these systems, which regrettably has a high cost. But Martin was ready to pay this cost, and also to invest a lot of time in coding, and to also have his people, his teams, work a lot on coding in pursuit of new insights in data systems. And this could not be achieved by just a simple experiment on a standalone code base. You had to put it all together to see the disadvantages and advantages of certain design choices interacting with each other. And that also brings me to team, because you can also see in this overview picture of Martin that there are various stages, of course. The work started on MongoDB in 1993, and then there was a spin-off company in the area of data mining with data distilleries, where MongoDB was used as the engine for the data mining. The open source release of MongoDB after the exclusivity of data distilleries over the code expired in 2004 after 5 years. Then there is the Vectorwise spin-off that Martin Zukowski, Sandor Heyman, Niels, and me worked on, which actually is a different system, but that's a different story. And then, the creation of MongoDB Solutions, which was the second MongoDB company, because originally in 2008, already a spin-off was created that held the IP of MongoDB. But in 2013, MongoDB Solutions was founded to, on a business model of open source supporting enterprise customers for the open source MongoDB. But not only that, of course, there is a whole team behind that. And that was also very important for Martin. So here is one team picture of the group, of the database architectures group. While Martin used to talk about team as a football team. So of course, maybe the most famous people in a football team may be the strikers who make the goals. Okay, but with only people who make goals, you could say publish papers, you cannot really make a system. You also need midfielders, you need defenders, you need a keeper, you need the midfielder to have ideas, to have a creative pass. Maybe Martin was the midfielder there. You need defenders who would create testing infrastructures, who would make sure that the code is reliable, who would create documentation. You need a keeper who does code reviewing or version control. So make sure that no wrong code is checked in. So this is different people with different characteristics in the vision of Martin, and that is at odds, of course, with the way science is usually organized, because in science is a pyramid. Everybody needs to become a professor or go out in science. So it's up or out. You start as a PhD student. Some people continue as a postdoc. The goal is always to publish papers. And if you're a very good postdoc, then you become an assistant professor and maybe a real professor. And Martin tried to make space also in his team for people who would be permanently a defender or a midfielder in his football team. Of course, football teams also have they wear a tenue, so like I'm stripped down now. And we had various iterations of these different logos. I'll put my MonadiB sweater on now. Very warm. Okay, so let's see, does the camera see this? Camera, can you? Oh, I should not do that. The camera will be confused if I start. Yeah, there you can see it. So there's the MonadiB logo, by the way. It's Monet inspired. It's the bridge at Giverny, which is iconized in the MonadiB logo. Yeah, so Martin would always make sure that the team was provided with MonadiB branded clothing, and in various iterations there were even clubs. So people have maybe MonadiB clubs to market MonadiB as a Dutch product. Okay, yeah. This is not a team picture. Martin is also on it. He's a bit standing in the back on the right side. I find this, of course, an interesting picture with a very young Mr. Mueisen there. And I am hardly recognizable here, but okay. I'm on it in the center. Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So what I actually wanted to say about teams still was that now, at least in the Netherlands, well, there is the DORA declaration. So of course, in science we do have a crisis with this stupid focus on only more papers and no regard for real impact. So in the DORA declaration, at least people are discouraged for the most quantitative of ways of evaluating careers. So, but I think that Martin, in a way, was a pioneer also in this way of looking at evaluating people. And also in the Netherlands, the NWO, which is the Dutch NFS, and NSF, sorry. NFS is a file system. NSF, the Dutch NSF, they have this new policy of recognition, where also software outputs and data outputs are recognized. So these are all things that, Martin was promoting already. Maybe not at the policy level, but he was fighting for his people in his team to make this possible and to recognize this. And Martin himself was also recognized. So there are various pictures that show this. So In the middle top, this is the VLDB 10-year Best Paper Award that he was a co-recipient of. On the left side, in smoking, the ACM Fellows Dinner. Martin was one of the few Dutch ACM Fellows, together with Dijkstra and Tannenbaum, actually, number 3. And of course, when Martin retired, we had this Zoom event with participation of Natasha and Gustavo, who will talk also later, where Martin, to his surprise, got the royal decoration. He became a knight in the Order of Orange Nassau, the database knight. And I think Martin really appreciated that. It is very sad that he could only really enjoy this for a few months, because a few months later, I understand that he heard that he had leukemia. And this whole fight against the disease started. Okay, so here we see Martin. Actually, this is a picture taken at VLDB, and he's talking about how dinosaurs are going to go away, of course, and are going to be eaten by mammals, actually. And we see him in his pose. He is, he's describing a counter-current ID, as he likes to do. And what kind of counter-current IDs can I point you to? Well, one of the ones that you would certainly remember is data fungi, the rotting data. Actually, I learned that Tova Milo was working on this topic now. So this was the big data space fungus, and it actually also led to a CIDR paper with Lefteris as co-author, the database system with amnesia. I would say a typical Martin idea, of course, and a typical, something that some people would say at the time, okay, crazy, but Martin had very, very many ideas, and he was extremely original, and it was like a complete continuous fountain of ideas. Many of them at the time may have been called crazy, but some of them actually really were big hits, and like column stores, for instance. So here's another one, recycling with Milena. Database cracking led to a lot of work, actually, with Stratos. The idea that you would not create indexes, but which is what database systems do, of course, that you create indexes up front. Here the idea was every query is an advice how to better store the data. So you create indexes as the workload goes, and you optimize the data on the fly towards the current workload. An idea that is quite original and promising. But I also would like to mention is this paper. That's not a published paper, but it was a paper that was circulated in the VLDB endowment. The VLDB endowment is the board that governs both PVLDB, the VLDB conference, and the VLDB journal. And we already had publication crises 20 years ago. And actually the reason that PVLDB is PVLDB came because of this paper, where Martin had the vision that rather than just going for the next conference deadline, all the conferences would work together, and there would be continuous submission cycles like you now have in PVLDB, journal style, and there would be reviewing, and the conferences would bid on fish from this pond of accepted papers and put together nice programs for the conference that they would organize. So this vision also included the idea that ICDE and Sigmund would collaborate. But well, it was a successful vision inside VLDB itself. So this is the current VLDB model. So VLDB is a journal, papers get accepted, and at the end of the year, a program is created from the accepted papers of that year. And that is a result of, well, this proposal that Martin circulated in the endowment. So Martin is relatively no longer here. So and I am sad at least about the fact that yeah, we are now looking at this black space. We will not get the next crazy idea or the next great idea because Martin is no longer there. There is also maybe something to be said about Martin and me. And well, of course, I would not be here without Martin. That is very sure. And very many things that I learned from Martin. So I'm very grateful for his mentorship. He was always available. You could always enter his room and ask questions, and always interesting discussions would emerge. He always seemed to have time for that. And well, Martin, I already kind of talked about code over papers, systems as fundamental research. So these values are very much instilled in me. And they come from Martin. So yeah, I will miss him a lot. And that was my talk. Hello.
I normally already have trouble reading my own handwriting. Now I've been writing in the train, so it's extra exciting. So I don't have to tell you that Martin was a great and visionary scientist. Peter already did it and did it much better than I could have done. So I'd like to share some good memories of Martin with you. In the early 80s, 82 to be precise, Japan started the 5th generation project. And at the same time, computer science programs started to become independent in the Netherlands. And these two things combined made the Dutch government decide that they would put money in computer science research. And for example, CWI got money to start a few new groups. For example, one on expert systems, one on distributed operating systems, Amoeba, and one on distributed adaptive information systems, DAISY. Martin had not even defended his PhD thesis, but he applied to lead that program and he got accepted. He was hired. So in May 1985, the group started, and he did not only get money to fund him, but he also got money to fund 2 PhD students. So for each among us, even before he finished his PhD student, he got something comparable to what is now called a VD grant. Pretty impressive, I would say. And one of the 2 PhD students he hired was me. And we both started at September 1 in 1985. Well, I don't know how many of you have seen Martin's PhD thesis. Probably not very many, because he was not very proud about it. Because there was nothing about systems in there. There were mainly definitions and some theorems. And when he had defended, he had vowed that he would never, ever prove a theorem again. And I think he kept to this vow. Like Peter said, he went all into engineering and so into systems buildings, and that was much more his cup of tea. But he allowed me complete freedom in what I wanted to do. And I tried to devise a theory that would allow you to query object-oriented databases, both for classes and objects. I'll be honest, I did not completely succeed, or you could say I failed, but I like it more if you say I didn't completely succeed. But still, I defended in 1990. Martin was not yet a full professor, so Peter Apers helped him out as being my formal thesis advisor, but Martin had done all the work. And I'm probably just as not proud of my thesis as Martin was about his, but such is life. Still, he kept me on, because in the end of, just before I wrote my own thesis, together with him, I wrote a project proposal, the first one in my life, and that was funded. And so I was a postdoc on that. Well, that project had just started. Martin got another source of funding together with Philips and Peter Apers for the Prisma database machine. I don't think many will know about this. It was with Philips, then a big Dutch electronics company. They also made computers. It was decided that everything should be done in Ada. There were more requirements that Martin had to keep to. He finished the project like you should, but at that moment he decided that he would never, ever do work on a project where somebody else puts down the constraints. Basically, he has sat down and at that moment he invented MonadDB. While this was going on, he pointed me to something called data mining, and that was by far the best advice I've ever been given. And this data mining research got a lot of attention from companies, and our algorithms neatly fitted MonadDB. So the effect was what Peter already showed. We got data distilleries, the biggest adventure Martin and me ever undertook together. And we were not only colleagues, we were friends. Our wives early on decided to be each other's best enemies and had fun, heaps of fun just out of that phrase alone. They would join dinner at the end of social group events, and I haven't seen so many baffled PhD students as during those events. Two of these ladies that would break down the house, basically. Once Martin decided, so somewhere, I don't know, 2005 thereabout is my guess, he decided that he would come with me to one of my conferences, HTML PKDD. He wanted to get to know the people that went to that conference or those conferences. Our wives also came, they took cooking courses. She still makes wonderful risotto. And Martin joined the scientific event. The baffling thing to me was that not only did he know at least as many people as I do, so he introduced me to people rather than the other way around, for which he came, but he also did not hesitate people to tell them that they should skip all this theory and start building systems. He really tried to convert people there. And not everything that we did was work related. We also went, for example, yearly to the TEFAF together. This is a big art fair in Maastricht once a year. We would stay in nice hotels, have wonderful dinners, there would be some shopping, and of course a visit to the fair. While Martin certainly enjoyed the art, I think he enjoyed the lunches with salmon and champagne much more than the art. He also bought me a wonderful present at TEFAF, but that is a story for another time. Martin also could be very convincing. Once, to celebrate a special occasion, and I'm sorry, I forgot which one, Joost or René, I've seen Joost I can't see it. I have my reading glasses on, so I don't see any of you. But now I can more or less see maybe they can help me. But it was somewhere in the south of the country, and it turned out that he had organized a balloon trip. I have vertigo. For me, this is already very high. I'm happy I'm having my reading glasses on. I can't see that deep. So I declined. I said, no, I'm not going to do this. But like I told you, he could be very convincing. So somehow, and I still don't know how, he convinced me to step into the balloon anyway. Trust me, I've had my eyes closed all the time. Anyway, for me, Martin was the best thesis advisor I could have had. Complete freedom, source of great ideas. Much more than that, he was a wonderful friend, and I will never forget him. Thank you.
Thanks, Arno.
So for those who don't know me, I'm Arjen de Vries, and I also worked with Martin for a long time, but my main area is information retrieval and not databases. But my thesis advisor was Peter Apers, and I made the trip to Amsterdam from Twente in 1999 to work at CWI. So, dear colleagues and friends, Martin's sons, René and Joost, their partners, and even a grandchild from Martin. We're gathered here at CIDR in Amsterdam to share our thoughts and memories and how appropriate to have this memorial here and now. Martin lived and worked here in Amsterdam, but he was much more a part of the worldwide, somewhat US-centric database community than he was a Dutch scientist. During my PhD, I've heard people make comments like Martin with his database system made in a derogative way. And the feeling was mutual. When I, as a postdoc, attempted to acquire funding from NWO, the Dutch Science Foundation, Martin was not exactly motivating in his remarks that they only care about past performance. We can state without hesitation that Martin was too extraordinary to be bounded by our scientific system. And I will argue here among friends that Martin couldn't care less. He had a much grander vision for what to do with his remarkable talents. To me, Martin was much more an artist than a scientist. And I believe that he would definitely approve of this view. Who has seen the works by Monet in real life understands the grandeur that matches Martin's art. It was only presented in the form of data management contributions, really stretching far beyond just scientific work. Really, Martin mainly cared about his own creativity and expressing that in crazy original ideas, as Peter already shared a few. He was never impressed by papers that I thought interesting. He did need the rigor of Peter and Stefan to sell his ideas in the scientific community. I hope that you understand that this is not a critique. I do not want to disregard Martin's contributions to the database field. These are immense. But the key to these contributions are their originality, enabling us to view the same world in a new way again and again. Really, the same way an artist creates different works in a unique and impressive style of our own. So how can we characterize Martin's style as a data artist? I'd say his work is more Mondrian than Monet, in the sense that he opened up new perspectives using very basic principles, just like the colors and lines in the style. He'd ask questions like, okay, here you have a database shell. What will you type? And he wouldn't tell you anything about the database, right? Just to make you think how hard it is to actually think about what's in the database if you don't know it. He created the many analogies. Actually, Peter took away a little bit of the list that I made too. These data fungi, fragmented worlds, mammals and dinosaurs, database cracking, your friendly butler Charles. And I'm only listing a very tiny bit of all the fantastic beasts that Martin would come up with. You can only try to imagine how incredibly inspiring it always has been to work with Martin, to witness his thinking process, seeing firsthand how great ideas come about, and how data art comes into existence. I want to be honest and add that being close to such a brilliant mind is not always easy. The closer you were, the harder it could be. In that sense, I was pretty safe. My own interests were distinct enough to never really feel the heat. But I too had to find out how to best collaborate. What made Martin very special is that he was working very hard to also find out that how to best collaborate. He was always looking for the best way for you to stay on board in his team. He'd create opportunity. I do not think I would have been full professor if it weren't for his coaching. And if the science community wouldn't be the best path for someone near to Martin, he'd just find him a different way to stay on board. A new role in the institute, a newly founded company. His creativity as a manager would rival the originality of his scientific work. So I agree with Peter that Martin invented erkennen en waarderen. This is this recognition and rewards in English. He could shine. He knew he would shine himself because he wouldn't seek 10 identical players, but build a team. And he'd ask you to decide where you'd play the best. He also had a sharp eye for talent and wouldn't hesitate to help you realize or actually tell you where you should play. In a discussion or even in a conversation, Martin could be poignant. I look up this word. I found it perfect to capture what I wanted to express. It says, according to the dictionary, poignant is painfully affecting the feelings, piercing, but also pleasurably stimulating. Now, I want to close with a few personal words of thanks. Martin, you were a tremendous source of inspiration. You made us see our talents and make the most of these. You were very important for my career, both inside academia and outside as aspiring entrepreneur. You coached me for more than 20 years, and I'm very grateful for this influence on my life. Our relationship was mostly professional, but you were very supportive when I needed a little help to restart my life after leaving a long relationship, and encouraged me and Spin co-founders Wouter and Roberto in choosing our own path in entrepreneurship, paired with the right degree of being pushy and critical, so we could have success. Martin, you taught me how to be independent. I thank you for that more than anything else. Would there ever be a museum of data art? The works and life of Martin Kersten would be the founding exhibition. May you rest in peace.
Try to solve this problem.
Natasha. Okay.
Good evening. My name is Natasha Ilamaki. I'm not at CWI. I don't live in the Netherlands. I don't know Martin in the intimate way that our colleagues here elaborated on. But I really feel that I really felt the need and desire to express a few thoughts about Martin. I'm not going to be coherent, so, so much for consistency here. But it's important because Martin was and still is a great presence in our lives, scientific lives, but a lot of times also as a friend in our personal lives. And this is the case for me. I met him many, many years ago. I don't even remember when, but I think it was the beginning of my career as a professor when I was at Carnegie Mellon University. I think one of the first times we talked more extensively was in 2001, when we met with Peter and Stefan and Martin in Rome, in that godforsaken VLDB. And we discovered that we were working at the same time on the same topics and had our first paper at VLDB on the same things. And we started this great collaboration on so many dimensions that's going strong until today. Martin was there, and he was a great colleague to meet. I was a first-year assistant professor, which is worse than a first-year graduate student in terms of stress and agony and questions in my head. And Martin, throughout the years since then, he was just a source, an endless source of inspiration, of great ideas, of inventions that we came to discover and then learn from. And what had surprised me from this very beginning until the end was the fact that he could talk from high-level vision to silicon on a huge breadth of topics. And I'm not going to repeat what everybody else said, but I, for one, was always surprised by his imagination. I mean, my paper titles are awfully boring. His paper titles have words like, dinosaurs and sommelier and butler and fungus and they're interesting and make you want to read the paper and make you want to do databases because of that paper. He made people come to our community. He was inviting and witty and sparkly. And when he was giving a talk, he invited questions, and then he gave all these imaginative answers, and it was great. His mind was like a volcano of new ideas. He hosted me for talks and visits, and he was always a gentleman. And in this non-binary world, if I think of a gentleman, Martin will be at the top. I remember I was here as a committee member for Martin Tchaikovsky's PhD in 2009, and Martin, afterwards, he took me to this beautiful chocolate place in Amsterdam, and he gave me a box, and he said, "Fill this box with chocolates. It's going to be my present to you." And I mean, it's just the way that he reached out to people, and the way that he would talk to everybody, to students, to other faculty members, to friends, to colleagues, caring and tireless in all these dimensions, and also a team builder. And I remember taking example from him as a young faculty member on how he was promoting his students and colleagues instead of promoting himself. Which to me was an inspiring thing, because it just makes sense. I mean, we go to academia for that, right? To promote our students. And when he called me in 2019 to announce to me that I had won a major award in databases, And it was I didn't even dare dream that I would ever win this award. It felt so unreal to me. And I was at SAP in Waldorf, and I was about to give a talk. And 5 minutes before I went up on stage, I get a phone call, and I don't know why I even answered it, but oh yeah, I saw that it was Martin, and I didn't know why he was calling me. So I'm like, yes. And I was in the audience, and there was stuff going on. And Martin announced to me, he was the chair of the committee, that I was winning this award. And cross my heart, I really thought he was, because he had won the award before, it was the Code Innovation Award. And I really felt that he was happier that I had won this award than when he had won this award himself. I mean, it felt like he couldn't contain himself about how happy he was that he was the one to announce to me this award. So that's all I had to say about this beautiful mind and selfless person. And I hope that from wherever he is, he can see us and he can be happy that we're here remembering him. And thank you, Peter and Stefan, for organizing this session. It means a lot to us. Thanks.
Thanks, Natasha.
Thank you, Peter. I'll speak until my voice disappears. This is not my regular voice. I'm not Batman. I lost my voice yesterday. My name is Yannis Ioannidis, for those of you who don't know me. I haven't been intimately involved with CWI or worked with Martin in any extensive way. I do have a MonetDB t-shirt, by the way, that he gave me once, but because of my growth here, I didn't wear it today. I'll need a renewal if possible. I'll speak from my experiences with Martin in three elements: how he cared about science and research, how he cared about people in general and his people in particular, and then how he cared about the community, the world. In 2006, I was program chair of EDBT, and Martin was one of the keynote speakers that I invited to give the keynote speech. And the paper had a title, Database Architecture for Fertilizers. You see what Natasha said about innovative titles. Column, just in time, that was cracking. Just enough, that was the fungus. And autonomous growth, that was, autonomy in databases. And in his abstract, he was saying organic database, this, that, the other, that we want an autonomous, self-descriptive, self-organizing, self-repairable, self-aware, and stable store, recall, functionality, its environment. And essentially, this captures the entire philosophy of what the vision was for Martin. And in his presentation, he presented three cases where he said the philosophy that people talked about. I look at what people are doing. They have umpteen assumptions. Maybe they're aware of them, maybe they're not. And I'll remove one of them. And I'll say, what if we remove this one assumption? And then the world changes completely. And he gave these three examples by what assumption he was removing. And it was as if this huge mountain that we all climb when we do research was simple. He had a way to make it simple that we can all be like him. He had a very great way on conveying his messages. And this, instinctively what we do, he made it as a method. And it was beautiful to see these three particular cases, all crazy ideas, as people talked about, that nevertheless became mainstream in what we do in the particular ways or in similar ways. He was opening roads. The word open is very key to how Martin lived his life, both his personal life, his professional life. And that's why he made impactful contribution after impactful contribution continuously. And it was amazing. He had so many questions after his presentation. It was great. I was really glad that I had invited him. I knew him, of course. I knew his research. We talked in every conference. But it was the simplicity of this huge thing that is called research. What was amazing. I was really impressed, even after knowing all that he had done until that time. The second thing is how he cared about his people. And I'll give one example. And whoever I'm referring to, they will forgive me because it's the closest to me, my knowledge of how Martin dealt with that. One of his students, one of his co-workers after he got his PhD, stayed around and then eventually went back to Greece. And he came to work with me. Sigmund 19 in Amsterdam, the last Sigmund until this year that was pre-COVID and alive, were in the Van Gogh exhibition. Martin and I talked for a long time. And he was saying, he's amazing about his student, his ex-student. He's amazing, he does this, he does that. But now he comes to Greece because he likes sailing, he likes, what Greece offers abundantly. And he will work with you, but he may not be happy there. Let's work together. Let's see from our side where his past is and the future he's building. Let's find what will make him happy. At least to the extent that professionally Martin and I could work together to take care of this one student who's leaving Martin, so to speak, and coming to work with me. His family, his academic family, was not a temporary thing, was forever. And there may be some obvious examples like Peter and Stefan who stuck around, but this is true. And at least from this one example that for me was so enlightened. Let's make sure that whatever he does, he becomes happy. And that was very moving. And my third experience about Martin was about his care about how we're doing as a world, as a society, where we are moving, and how computing can help that. At the time, I was ACM Secretary Treasurer, and he was asking me, how it is to be in ACM and working on all this. And openness, again, this word openness was a very important thing for Martin. You saw eventually MongoDB was open source, open access, open science. By the way, I tried to find the text of the paper that he wrote for that conference, and it's not in the open science portal of CWI. So we should take a look at this. And we talked for a long time on how to make openness work, how to, because of that paper, of the paper pond, that was in the philosophy of open science, that now we're trying is mandated from the top, but also motivated by the bottom, how to do open science, how to change the way we do research so that we don't have this paper diarrhea, but still we can publish in micro publications, major publications, and so on, our key results, and get together in conferences in the way that is open, and the DORA declaration and the efforts from the US and Europe are on the way. And Martin was already working on that, thinking about this, how to change the overall research cycle so that we're more productive and more focusing on what matters. And he also even got into talking about sustainability of the world and how we as computing, especially as data scientists, if you want, or data engineers, who are at the core of what needs to be done. I mean, the chemists and the economists and so on are those that will solve the problem, but they cannot solve it without us. And we got into talking about with Martin, about all this. He genuinely cared about the world. And now I'm the SM president. And that discussion with Martin resonates very well with me in what we are trying to do as ACM, what we are trying to do as SIGMOD and the database community. And let me, if I may say, on behalf of Martin's thoughts and Martin's memory, please come join in any effort that we are doing to make this world a better place. In that sense, any little thing or a little bigger thing that any one of us can do will be a small memorial to Martin's legacy and Martin's spirit, which I also really miss. Thank you, Martin, for everything that you taught me. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Yannis. Gustavo.
Okay, thank you. I am Gustavo Alonso, and I realized that we have heard a lot about Martin as a researcher, as a member of the community, as an advisor, somebody who has been leading many, many ideas, and probably we can spend many, many hours, probably days talking about this and still not give justice, or make justice to all his contributions. So I just want to say very few words, especially for those of you who either didn't have the privilege to know Martin, because you are young and just joined the community, or people who actually met him mostly here in the Netherlands, and were not part of this broader community, right, the research community worldwide. So before I talk about my personal experience, let me just tell you, I'm a former member of the BLM Endowment. This is a group of people that volunteer to run BLDB. This is where he actually published this paper about the pond, and where his ideas eventually became the model for BLDB. And where he passed away, there was a stream of messages, right, of condolences, very deep felt from all over the world. And it was very moving to see, because unfortunately we have seen other people passing away. And the difference is that you could see in those messages that for all these people throughout the world, Martin was not just an excellent researcher, an outstanding researcher, a great person, somebody with a lot of ideas, but he was really a friend. It was somebody who was very close to our hearts. It was somebody who was extremely generous with his time, not only on research, but also on the personal level. Somebody that every time you met him at conferences, he would remember your personal situation. He would ask about yourself, about your family. He would engage in a conversation with you about the world. And he will always have, in the same way that he had it in research, at the personal level, he will be an incredibly inventive person, very supportive and extremely open. In my case, Natasha, I met him when I was a young assistant professor. And in addition to many ideas, many crazy ideas, that I have to say, in spite of the fact that I think of myself as being also somebody a little bit crazy in what I do with my research, nowhere near what Marty actually suggested. And I was a little bit afraid of many of the ideas that he was actually putting to me and suggesting that I will try to do those things. But not talking about research, the important thing to me was the support. Somebody who actually has been very, very recognized in the community, somebody already at the time with a great curriculum, great visibility, who will approach a young professor who actually didn't have anything to show for, that still had not done anything meaningful, and will actually generously spare time, ask me about, I have moved to the United States, ask me about how it was to work in Europe, how I was doing, how was my career, what were my plans, to keep in touch, that if I have any questions about how the system works and so forth, right, he was ready to help. This is something that I had seen from very, very few people. And I have seen over the many years, I have seen very, very few people being as generous as he was with his time. And as I said, not just as a researcher, but simply as a friend, as a human who was there for other people. And with that thought, again, thanks, Martin, for what you did with me and to me, helping me in my career. And thanks everybody for being here, because I think Martin, I can only think, and sorry if this sounds a bit reverential, all the jokes that he will make about this. I think this is something that we need to remember of Martin. Right? All right, thank you.
Thanks, Gustavo. I think we're with Andy, the last one. Yes. It is on the second window though. So it's not entirely obvious how to do. You have to move the mouse to the right side. Yeah, like that. Yeah, well, that is open maybe a new tab. Yeah.
All right, does it look like I'm shielding from my company? I'm not. I have a link there.
You should at some point start holding this microphone.
Yeah, not shielding from my company. Right. So I wrote a blog article recently about what happened last year, and then there's a little bit here about Martin. And there's a link I want to get here. So I'm gonna tell two stories about Martin. One was the last time I saw him was before the pandemic, was in LA, which I think was VLDB 2019. And he and I had like an hour discussion about the design decisions he made in MonADB, which I thought was wrong, like mmap, and he thought was right. And so we had a great discussion about that. And then the other thing he brought up during this conversation was that there was a bunch of people that would watch my YouTube class lectures where I would say, MonADB did it this way, that's wrong. Vectorwise does it this way, or Hyper does it this way, that's the better way to do it. And so then people would email him and say, hey, Andy said this, you're doing it wrong. Why, right? And he showed me some of these emails, and he would go back and forth for like 5 or 6 back and forth to these random people in India and China to explain why he did certain things. And I was very impressed with that. And as Gustavo said, he was very, very generous with his time. So then the next story I would say also too was, I thought him winning the Royal Award for databases from the Dutch government, I thought that was the greatest thing ever, like better than the Turing Award. Like he's a royal knight for databases. That's amazing. And so I had an email filter where anytime he and I would correspond, it would rewrite his from name to be Sir Martin Kersten, right? And he would complain, yada, yada. So he gave a talk with us during the pandemic. And, during the pandemic, we did like a Zoom lecture series, and he gave a talk which I advise you to go watch because it sort of summarizes all the things he did in MonADB that he thought was good ideas and bad ideas. And so because I knew he didn't want me to make a big deal about him being knighted by the Dutch government, we ended up hiring somebody to give a royal greeting, and I told him that the Dutch government required me to play this video before he's allowed to give a talk. And so I'm going to play the video real quickly. I will say actually hiring a Dutch person to speak Dutch is surprisingly cheap, right? There's not really a big market for it. But so I found one guy who could do it on Fiverr, but the problem was I didn't know, because it's Dutch. It sounds like Dutch, but I wasn't sure. So then I had to hire another Dutch guy to then listen to it to prove that it was actually real. So I'm going to play this video and I'll say, oh, hold up. Is there audio? Yeah. So he's going to give a reaction about 10 seconds or 20 seconds once he realizes what it is. And the other time he made the same face to me was back at when VLDB was in LA in 2019, because I tried to convince him to get a MonADB face tattoo, right? To help differentiate himself between Snowflake. He made the same face here that he made back then. So I'll play this video and it's done. So it's in the corner. Sorry if you can't see it. It's the best I have.
Bereid u alstublieft voor op de eerbare Sir Martin Kersten van Amsterdam, een heilige ridder in de Koninklijke Orde van de Nederlandse Leeuw, van Zijne Majesteit Koning Willem-Alexander Klaus George Ferdinand. Lang leven Sir Martin!
All right, so again, I don't know why the Dutch government sent me that. They were flying by that. So first time heard of it.
Okay, so can I take the screen now again?
Yeah, go ahead, sir.
So, anyway, a lot of my interactions with Martin that wasn't restricted by database systems were basically like that. So he was a great fun guy, and we miss him. So thank you.
Thanks, Andy. Okay, now I have to get out of this. Now I forgot. Now I don't have my presentation anymore. Sorry. Gabor? Okay. Oh yeah, excellent. Where is my? Yeah, there it is. Okay, you're back. Okay. Yeah. So this is the end of the Martin Kersten memorial, at least the presentation part. But there is a very important part that's now ahead of us, which is the reception, where we will be able to have a drink and also have a snack. And Martin is giving the right example. He is holding Dutch bitterballs. Actually, in the picture on the right, if you look closely, there are actually two of them there. So I'm not sure what he's doing. I think he's using his second hand, or it's lying there balancing. But yeah, he did like bitterball. So in memory of Martin, I invite you all to go out and well, let's have the reception now. Thank you.